we're all here to learn about SQL. What I'm going to do is just quickly share with you today's agenda. I want to, I'm perhaps preaching to the choir here about why SQL is important, but nevertheless, I'll spend a minute or so talking about why that matters. We'll then jump into some database terminology, which you will hear a lot in the world of SQL. Today, we're actually going to write SQL, right? We all will write SQL, see results come back. And we definitely want to leave you with a bunch of training material. One thing to note is we have designed this in such a way that your learning doesn't end when this webinar ends. We're going to leave you with access to our SQL editors, and we're going to leave you with a bunch of sample queries to run so you can do this on your own time and even get more of your team members involved. Just diving in. So why SQL? A lot of us, especially in the Amazon e-commerce realm, spreadsheets still play a huge role, Google Sheets, spreadsheets. But one of the challenges as you scale with that is it can be time consuming to manage data in spreadsheets. It could be error prone. Handling large data sets, especially if you're exceeding into, going into millions of rows. Excel is not really designed to do that. And in the world of Amazon and e-commerce, we are constantly trying to connect disparate data sets, whether that's sponsored ads and DSP data with organic sales, or inventory with ad spend. I can go on, but these are fragmented data sets, and it is really difficult to do that. Connecting them is really challenging in Excel. Yes, VLOOKUPs can get you quite far, but as you all know, it can be challenging. So in that context, what we view is that this necessary progression to scale your business, whatever the business might be, brand, seller, agency, aggregator, it doesn't matter. You really have to go down this path of storing more and more of your data in databases, data warehouses. That's just an obvious step for scaling. I don't think I need to convince you about that. And what is SQL in this context? SQL in this context is really a mechanism to probe and query your database for data. Okay. The question is, okay, so what happens when you start to learn SQL? There's tons of benefits I can talk about, but I'll summarize this into 3 with some very specific examples. One is connecting your disparate data sets just becomes a whole lot easier. Like I said before, imagine the use case where you have to connect sponsored ads data, DSP data. And for those of you that may not be operating in the Amazon realm and are on this webinar, sponsored ads and DSP are Amazon advertising products. But combining ad data with organic sales data is a classic example, right? So and there's many. So connecting disparate data sets becomes easy. Figuring out and dealing with large data sets, like as an example here, like if you want to go analyze search term data or for the past 24 months, that's a massive data set. Really hard to do in things like Excel, but SQL can help you do that, right? And last but not least, all visualization tools today, when I say visualization tools, whether it's Google Data Studio, Tableau, Power BI, you name it, they all support SQL behind the scenes. So you could write SQL statements, get data out, and build the charts you want, right? So that's another huge benefit as well. Before I dive into the technical aspects of SQL in a moment, I do want you to kind of keep 2 things in mind. You could look at SQL as this big, huge technical domain that it is hard to get your arms around. However, I can speak from my own personal experience. I'm not a technical person, but I know I've learned SQL enough to get what I need from most data that is accessible to me. So there's really a small number of things that you have to learn, and that can get you 99% of the way, especially if your objective is to just retrieve or analyze data. So just keep that in mind. And I don't want you to get too overwhelmed with anything technical today. I do not believe anything here is something that you cannot grasp, which probably take a little bit of time. That's one key point. And the second key point is, again, we are setting this up so that you continue to practice beyond the webinar. I hope you do so. And we are certainly here to help answer any questions beyond this as well. So we have a live chat. You could come to our live chat and ask questions if you have any. I want to make sure everybody has the technical access to the portal. So I'm going to switch screens and show you what it looks like. I want to make sure you can get to this point. Are you all able to get to this point? So when you log in, go to the top view, top drop down and just say SQL editor. So let me switch back to some, a little bit of theory, and then we'll come right back to that page. First of all, let's get some terminology out of the way. You will hear the word tables when we talk about databases all the time. Tables are entities that kind of look like a spreadsheet grid view, right? So here's a couple of examples. Here's an example of, let's say, a campaign table. A table has a bunch of rows and columns. Relationships, or what are called joins. And this is super, super important. I would equate it to like VLOOKUPs in spreadsheets. You got two different pieces of data, you connect them with VLOOKUPs. That's what joins help you do. At the top is a campaign table. It's got a campaign ID, name, date, and spend. Down below is a keyword table, which has got ID, but it also has a campaign ID, right? Which means these keywords belong to that campaign with an ID of 2. So that's the relationship between the two tables, right? Keywords are connected to the campaigns with an ID. With SQL, you can combine these two tables, kind of an equivalent of a VLOOKUP, let's say, and produce a view like this, which is I've got keyword, date, and spend columns, the 3 columns on the right from this table, and I got campaign name from the table above. That's called a join. And I'm not kidding when I say this. If you figure out joins, you're pretty much done with SQL, right? Like everything else is small syntax, you'll figure it out. But if you figure out joins, you have superpowers. So you've got tables, you've got relationships or joins. And then the last thing I want to say is any database has a schema. Schema is just a description of what tables exist, how are they related, and what are the fields in those tables. In fact, when we go do some training SQL runs here, you're operating on a schema that we already defined for you. It's a dummy or a demo schema with some demo data set in there. Typically, in your organization, if you have a database or if you have an IT team that owns a database, here's how the conversation will go, right? If you want to write SQL, right? You typically have to download what is called a SQL client. It's a piece of software you can download. There's lots of options. You download, and that's what you use to connect to a database, okay? And once connected, you start writing SQL to get the data you want. So you get your setup done, you understand the schema, you start exploring. This is a conversation you're going to have internally. Now, we are simplifying all this for the training. You don't have to worry about any of this. It's all set up and ready to go. But I'm just saying that when we're done here and you want to talk to someone internally and get a database connection, like these are the questions to ask. You're in the SQL editor. Go to that screen that has our SQL training stuff. Copy that first statement and go back to the SQL browser, the SQL editor, enter, and hit run. That's all I want you to do. On the left, well, by the way, just make sure that this drop down here that says schema is set to public for you. But underneath this, right here, you will see tables. And go ahead and click campaign. And it shows you all the different columns in the campaign table. What we did here is we basically told the database to send you back. When you say star, you're basically telling the database, I want all my columns, every one of them, from the table. Campaign is the table name, okay? Now, I also introduced a little criteria here that says limit 10. What that is telling the system is, I just want 10 records back. You do this because you quickly want to understand what the data looks like in a table. Imagine if a table has hundreds of millions of rows, you don't want to do a select star from that table. It's going to bring your system down. So don't do that. Just put a little limit on 10. And then down below, you can see every single field in that table, date, account name, so on and so forth, metrics, dimensions, all of those. All statements will have a select. Star means all columns in a table. you're specifying the table name, and then you're specifying the criteria. And this criteria can get a lot more complex. I could change this to, for example, I think spend is one of the fields. I'm just going to just change this to, I want to see all campaigns that have, type with me, by the way, everybody, select star from campaign, where spend, which by the way is a column. You'll actually see these auto prompts coming up because they're already columns, where spend greater than $300, right? You could do that and just hit run, but just do this. Oh, there's no data with that. Okay, fine. Let's see. I'll get some data back. Oh, there you go. So I just changed the number and I got some data back. But the point is, what I want you to really understand is, you use this word where, and you can specify whatever criteria you want. And by the way, you could have things like, you can put an and statement and add more criteria. I would go back to my SQL query and then grab that next statement, clear this, and just go ahead and enter and hit run. The only change we have made is we've replaced the star with specific column names. The column names, either you could see them on the left or you can see them in these columns. Let's go ahead and pick the third query, which is what we call aliases. And you're going to, these will come handy as we get more and more advanced. What's happening here is, as you can see, there is this alphabet A. What we are telling the system is, look, I want data from the campaign table, but going forward, I'm just going to call it alphabet A. And then I'm going to say A.date, A.campaign name, A.spend. This is going to be super valuable as we get into kind of more complex criteria. So this is one form of aliases. By the way, the other form of aliases, I could take each of these fields and give it whatever name I want, right? SQL webinar. Let me change date to SQL webinar, and I hit run. See what happens to my column header? That's just become SQL webinar because that's what I called it. So aliases can be aliases for a table name, or you can create aliases for specific field names as well. And you may want to do this because a lot of you might run the query and then download it to a CSV and you want proper column headers. This is the way to do it. Let's go to number 4. We're all used to trying to remove duplicates from in our Excel tables. You could do the same here. You do that with the word distinct. So what I did is I said select distinct date, which means it's giving me all the unique dates for which we have data. Okay. But also notice that it's showing up in, let's call it ascending order. What I want to do is I actually want the latest date first. So I could change the sort on this. Okay. Again, either type with me or copy SQL number 5. Okay. So I'm going to type here. I'm going to say the way you sort using SQL is you use the language order by, or use the term order by. And then either you can say the field name or the number of the field. So order by 1, the first field, descending. Okay. ASC for ascending, DESC for descending. And by the way, we're going to leave you with a bunch of resources to learn all the syntax, but so this is how you sort things, and watch the results down below. When I hit run, you see that the results are sorted. Now I could go one step further and build on what we have learned already. If I just want to know what is the last date for which there is data in the system, I could very simply say limit 1 of this. It'll tell me I have data for May 13th. Let's take this one notch up. I want you to take SQL number 6, and then let's talk about aggregations. This is the equivalent of running pivots in your Excel. So select date, sum, spend. Spend is a column in the campaign table. I'm running a pivot to say I want a sum of spend by date. There's a couple of syntactic things to remember. Every time you aggregate, you need a statement that says group by. Group by, what you're telling the system is I want to group by the first field, which is date. And of course, we can keep the order by 1 descending, which is I want the descending order of dates. So this is how you aggregate things. You can aggregate as many fields as you want. Let me just go ahead and add revenue. In terms of mathematical operations, there is sum, there is averages, there's lots of stuff you could be doing. Here is another, just another example of aggregation where we are aggregating the spend data by campaign type. So now you get data by different campaign types: sponsored product targeting, keyword targeting, so on and so forth. We are going to take this one notch up. I want you to copy SQL number 8. This is one of the key concepts. If you understand this well, you could get pretty far with SQL. What's happening here is we are joining two tables, a keyword table and the campaign table. So let me touch on, we have not run anything against the keyword table. So let me just show you on the left-hand side. By the way, you can just go to the dropdown and pick keyword. You could see all the fields in the keyword table. So keywords, match type, revenue, so on and so forth. It even has campaign name, but let's just pretend like campaign name wasn't there. It just had campaign ID. So how do you get campaign name and keyword in that case? You have to join the keyword table with the campaign table, okay? Or campaign type. This keyword table doesn't have campaign type, but the campaign table has campaign type. And how do you connect the two? Well, the keyword table has campaign ID. First, I'm saying that I want data from keyword table. I'm just going to call it A going forward. I'm going to join it with a campaign table. Now you see a word left join. I know most of you don't know what that means. I'll elaborate on this, but it's a kind of a join. Just play along with me here for a moment. So I'm saying keyword table joins with campaign table, and then you're specifying how they join together. They join on the campaign ID field. You're basically saying, I want to connect my keyword table and campaign tables with my campaign ID. Okay. Once you do that, at the top, you're choosing the fields you want to show. So from the keyword table, I want my keyword and match type fields. From my campaign table, I want my campaign name and campaign type fields. And down below are aggregations we just talked about. Okay. And because there are 4 fields on which you are pivoting, make sure that your group by has 1, 2, 3, and 4. You're basically telling the system, I want to pivot on all 4 of them, just like you would do in an Excel. Yeah, so that's joins. So the question for everyone's benefit is, why do I have a group by of 1, 2, 3, 4? What you're telling the system is, I want to pivot by keyword, match type, campaign name, and campaign type. That's 1, 2, 3, and 4. We pretty much covered the SQLs we want to cover today. On the page, there's intermediate SQL, advanced SQL. And by the way, there's also live chat if you have further questions. So just one quick note on joins, because it's an important concept. There are 3 kinds of joins. What we did was a left join, but actually there's probably more. But I'm going to quickly touch on these 3. There's inner joins, there is left joins, and there's right joins. Okay. What is the difference between them? So here's an example of an inner join. So here is one table. Here's another table. They're both being joined on the name. For an inner join, you will only get records back for which there's a match in both tables. For left join, you get all the records that are on the left side table, but only the matching records from the right side table. That's what we did between keyword and campaign, because we want everything in the keyword table. We don't want everything from the campaign table. We just want the stuff that matches the keyword's campaign ID. That's why we did a left join. And the right join is you just get data from the right table. Now, I know this is probably too theoretical. I'm like, how am I going to use this? I think as you run some sample queries, this will become more and more clear. Joins are really, really important to understand. You can join multiple tables together. And that is one of the huge benefits of having data in a database, especially fragmented data. Joins will help you pull them together. Just a quick summary of what we covered. We covered how do you retrieve records, how do you choose specific fields, importance of aliases, eliminating duplicates, sorting, aggregation, joining tables. But yeah, so you've taken the survey, go ahead and run all the SQL queries. Again, members on your team, just get a training account, follow the video, run the samples. The future webinar topics, and this is where I think it's super important, like please share your input. We're definitely going to do a SQL 201 where we probably get into more intricate joins, regex, so on and so forth, but also increasingly our focus will shift to more and more Amazon specific or e-commerce specific data schema. That's where we are going to go. I think that's pretty much it. Thank you so much. And until next time, happy SQL.